Hey, this is Joe with Grow It Build It, and today I'm going to tell you how to grow bee balm. This is one of my favorite plants that I grow. I have many patches of it around my little property, and I love it because of how showy it is, how long it blooms. The flowers just look like something out of this world, and this plant is one of the best at attracting hummingbirds. If you like hummingbirds, you need to grow some of this. So this would be a comprehensive grow and care guide for this plant, from growing conditions, how to propagate it from seed, from division, um, all sorts of tips on what to watch out for, what not to do, all that kind of stuff. I've been growing it for 5 or 6 years, so I'll try to share what I've learned with you. So let's get into it. So this plant is scientifically known as Monarda Didyma. So the genus is Monarda, and all species from that genus are actually native to North America, which makes it a little unique. But other common names of it is Oswego tea, scarlet bee balm, or red bee balm. As Oswego tea might hint at, it was used as a substitute when the colonists didn't have tea. And certain tribes Native American tribes in the United States did use it medicinally. I'm not going to cover anything medicinal or tea related on this one. That could be a subject for a future video, but I won't be talking about it here really. Also, all the information I'm telling you here is in our website, which I'll put links to the various articles covering those topics below. But growing conditions, though, and how big this gets. This will get 2 to 4 feet tall, depending on where you put it. So you can see pretty much every example of that height in this little shot of our little backyard micro prairie. It depends on how much sun it gets, moisture, and competition. It likes full sun. You'll get the most out of this plant if you put it in full sun and moist soil that drains well. The natural habitat for this plant is open woods, long stream banks, somewhere that it's going to have pretty much constant access to moist soil without being in a swamp. You can put it in medium moist soil that might dry out here and there, but you're going to have to water it. I have one patch at my yard that it gets sun from lunchtime until sunset, and that one, it'll get blasted and the leaves will start to wilt and droop down, and I'll just have to hit it with the hose for a while and it'll perk right back up. But if you're going to space the plant out, you want to space them around 2 to 3 feet. Basically, though, it's depending on what conditions you put it in is how big and full it will get. Now, this will spread by rhizomes a bit, which we'll talk in a little while, but this one's pretty easy to manage if you want to. So this is a mint. It is in the mint family. So you have opposite leaves right there. So they're side by side, and then the next set will be 90 degrees from that one, up or down, whichever way in the stalk. Now it also has a square stem that's going to have 4 sharp angles, and it'll be hollow too, so if you're trying to identify it before it blooms. But the blooms on this one are extremely unique. So each one of those red things coming off there is a flower with 2 petals, and the 2 petals form to make like a tubular structure. The flower heads will get 3 to 4 inches diameter when it's done blooming. So it'll start small like it kind of is right there, and then it'll get bigger and bigger. And the blooms will start in the center and work their way out. So here is an example of a young bloom where all the blooms are coming right out of the center of the flower head. And so this one just started, and it's going to slowly work its way out, which we'll see an example of one that is getting closer to being done blooming in just a second, right here. Now, it will bloom for a long time. This will bloom up to 2 months. You can deadhead it to try to prolong it as much as you can, but it's a pretty long bloom time from late spring to midsummer, and I'm in zone 6-7 in southern Pennsylvania. Now, also, it makes a good cut flower, so if you wanted to make a bouquet to put in a vase, this is a pretty good choice. And sometimes you get some funny little double blooms like I just did there. That happened this year for some reason. Hadn't happened before. What you're looking at here, this lavender one, is also Monarda Didyma. It's one I grew from seed several years ago. Bought a pack of seeds online. Picture was red. Description was supposed to be the red bee balm, but I got something that looked totally different. So be careful of that, folks. It's kind of hard to find seed for this actually. But there's that lavender one again. There's also a magenta one I have where, again, this is supposed to be Monarda Didyma. So just be careful with what you purchase if you're just starting out with this one. So get a reputable company and make sure they're located in America too. Hey, before I show you how to grow red bee balm from seed, I wanted to point out that if you like this style of flower, there's other species available that you can grow. I have Monarda growing in my yard and blooming from May, June, pretty much right up until October. So you can do that too. I'll make videos of these eventually and update the links in the description to include those, but until then there is an article down there, and I'll make the headline like other species of Monarda, but you can click on that to read a high-level overview of some of the other species available. It brings in the same kind of pollinators. So okay, let's get back to how to grow these from seed then. But about 3 to 4 weeks after they have bloomed, they will have seed heads form. Now I made a detailed video on how to save seed from this a couple weeks back, so look for the cards on the right. I'll put a card on how to do that. But if you wanted to propagate this from seed, here's what you got to do. So the seeds on this are very tiny, but there is no pre-treatment requirements at all. You can start this seed whenever. In fact, this is seed I saved this year, and I'm just sprinkling it on top of some potting soil that's moist. And I'm going to keep it moist. You want to just mist it. You don't want to use a watering can. Just a spray bottle works great, or a pump sprayer or something. It's easy to wash the seed out. I did this on 2 pots, and one of them I had no germination, and I think I just washed the seeds out, or it got rained on or something. I'm not sure. But again, there's no stratification requirements, no scarification requirements. This is an easy plant to germinate seeds from. So you want to put it, though, in some location where it's going to get morning sun and afternoon shade. I mean, this is, like September, and I'm growing this from seed. I just wanted to test the viability of the seed I saved. And after about 8 days, I had my first little germination right there. So, it's not hard to grow from seed. You don't have to wait around a long time. You don't need to do anything special. And there it is with a couple sets of true leaves. But this isn't the best way to propagate it, in my opinion. The best way to propagate this plant is by getting pieces of rhizome root, which I'm going to show you here. These are all little seedlings that I basically divided this year in May, very early May. So how do you do that? Well, let's take a look at it here. So this plant is going to spread via rhizome roots. This is actually what it looks like when it's emerging in the spring, by the way. You have those opposite leaves along the stem. And, you'll have one set, and then the next set will be rotated 90 degrees. But if you're not sure still, you can always break one off and take a look at the stem. If it's square and hollow, you got the right plant. But really, when it's early spring and they're just emerging, you can just dig them up like I did there, get a chunk of root, and plant it. There's no heat load on the plants. It's very easy to keep them alive and have them just jump out of their pots within a month. Like they'll grow so well. Now, if you don't want this to spread and you want to keep it very contained, like you have a very well manicured garden, I do have a video that explains how to do that with rhizome plants, which I'll put a card on the right for. But this plant is very easy to propagate this way. This is the easiest way to do it, in my opinion, because you can't always trust the seeds you buy online. You don't always get a lot of seed from this plant. So if you can have someone or know somewhere where you can get some of these little sprouts, it's the best way. Now there's the rhizome root with a new shoot coming off of it. If I cut, like, we'll just say 2 inches on each side of that shoot, maybe even 1 inch, it's pretty much going to grow. Plants in the mint family generally have a desire to live that is far greater than most other plants. I'll put it like that. So if you plant this in a pot right now, it's pretty much going to grow, and in a month, instead of being 2 inches tall, it can probably be 10 inches tall. I'm really not exaggerating there. I think the pictures I'm about to show you were like 6 weeks after I did all this, and I mean, that's how big these plants are. They're jumping out of their pots. They're very happy. So now it's time for us to talk about the wildlife. So this is one of the best hummingbird attracting plants I've ever known. It's actually the main pollinator for the plant. There's been university studies that I've linked to in my articles on this plant that show that ruby-throated hummingbirds are the primary visitors to pollinate this plant. Now, hummingbirds, they will show up, they will be there for 25-30 seconds, and then they're gone, and they might have pollinated a third of the flower patch. So they're here, and they're gone very quickly. Now, you don't see bumblebees as much, but you do get them. Now, the name bee balm actually refers to, it was used to treat bee stings back in the day. But bees don't really pollinate it, but bumblebees, they manage to do so. You know, they really have to work hard to jam their head up in there to get down the tubular flower to the nectar. So that's kind of fun to watch. And when there's not a whole lot blooming, if you got like a little bit of a gap, then you will have the bumblebees come hit this because it's, you know, it's nectar for them. But generally, the ruby-throated hummingbirds are going to be the main thing that pollinate it. You will also attract a large number of butterflies, bigger ones, swallowtails if they're around. I saw plenty of them. This guy was a great subject. He let me film him a lot this day. But you know, basically butterflies with their proboscis straws, you know, they can get down deep into the tubular flower and get the nectar. So it's very easy for them. Now, there are other smaller ones that I've found, skippers. I've seen other black swallowtails, so on and so forth. Not really any monarchs, but I generally don't see monarchs till they're on their way home. But I don't know if that's just a special thing with my case or not. But that little plant there was actually blooming in August this year. It's one I started this year from a rhizome root. But this is going to bring a lot of wildlife to your yard, though. So not so much for the bees, but for other pollinators. Now, it will also bring in these hummingbird moths, and these are really fun to watch if they let you get close to them. They tend to be not as skittish as an actual hummingbird. Sorry for the out of focus thing. Sometimes my camera doesn't do so well at slow motion. So now I want to talk about how to use it. Now, I've fully incorporated this plant into our backyard microprairie. And it does great there. It bridges the gap between bloomings of several species, from penstemon to coreopsis to this, and then I actually let some fleabane daisy go. But it blooms long enough, though, that you actually get a nice show with a lot of other species at the same time. And it's also, I let it run wild here and spread as much as it wants to. I think I planted 4 or 5 different patches here, and they're all doing pretty good. So that's the first way that I use it. Again, if you wanted to use it in a manicured garden, you could. You just have to use my pot trick, where you plant it in a pot with the bottom cut out. But anyways, this is the location where it gets blasted with sun all afternoon, and it'll actually droop down. Now, this actually is on top of landscape fabric. Still have landscape fabric there, but from the previous owners. But that's how shallow the roots are. And this here is this was just a few stalks when we moved in, and it was really like on the other side of this fence was a sheer wall of bush honeysuckle. Well, I've removed most of the honeysuckle for a certain amount, and that's just to allow it to spread, so you can see how much it spreads there. But all 3 of those will bloom. They overlap each other, so I get about 2.5 months of blooming. Now, the last thing I really want to show you here is the white spots on this. This is a disease called powdery mildew. Some of you may be familiar of it, some of you may not. There are ways to treat this. I've never done anything to it ever, and it doesn't harm the plants. It's just cosmetic. So for me, I've never done anything. All my plants are alive. Anyways, though, this is a really awesome plant to grow. Full sun, moist soil, drains well, and it's really showy, looks great, and bring in the wildlife. If you guys enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it.